One of the misleading aspects of the original Paradise Lost HBO documentary in 1996, as well as much subsequent coverage of this case, the West Memphis 3 case, is the portrayal of West Memphis as a, quote, small town, unquote. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail than I have in previous videos just to clarify a couple points about whether one should think of West Memphis as a small town or not. In Damien Eccles, this is the main figure of the three West Memphis 3, who was on death row and is still technically guilty due to the Alford plea, which is a sort of guilty plea. In his book, Life After Death, a New York Times bestseller, on the first page of the first chapter, he uses the following language. The hospital where I was born still stands in the small, rundown town of West Memphis, Arkansas. Now you can see that it's actually in his book. It turns up online in various places. This is from Bruce Sinofsky, who is one of the directors of Paradise Lost, and how it describes the three documentaries. The Paradise Lost trilogy chronicles the inhabitants of a small southern town a year after a series of brutal murders. And let me just show his Wikipedia page tonight, Sunday, January 16th, 2022. And again, the language is still there. The Paradise Lost trilogy chronicles the inhabitants of a small southern town a year after a series of brutal murders. And I watched the documentary, Paradise Lost, back in the 1990s, about 97 or 98, on VHS tape. And that was very much my impression, a small southern town. And that is the impression created by the original video. How does the original video do this? In a number of ways. This is one of the framing shots that shows a highway going by the Blue Beacon truck wash, which is very close to the murders. The murders occurred in this area here. And this is the neighborhood over here where the kids lived who were murdered, the Weaver Elementary School where they went to school. But you can see from this shot that you don't have a sense of a very large community at all. You have a sense of a community right off the highway with a small number of people. If you actually go this way, you end up in Memphis, Tennessee, a big city which today has over 650,000 people. However, it is not visible in this picture. It's very hazy over here. I suspect on a really clear day you could actually see skyscrapers and other signs of Memphis here, but you don't see them in this picture. It looks like you're out in the middle of Arkansas somewhere, far from population centers. This is another framing shot. This actually shows a different highway. This is Highway 55, which goes north-south and merges briefly with Highway 40, which is east-west. These are interstates, U.S. interstates, right in the center of West Memphis. And it's the neighborhoods right around this intersection area which are the subject of the documentary. In fact, however, West Memphis and the adjacent town of Marion cover a lot more range, a lot more territory than these flaming shots indicate. So let's take a look at West Memphis more in context. It's just across the river, 10 miles from downtown Memphis, Tennessee, a big city. West Memphis is this area here, and Marion, which is, they basically merge together, they're very close together cities. Marion is a smaller town. Calling it a town is debatable. It's about 5,000 to 6,000 people in 1993. Let's take a look at the Wikipedia page information on West Memphis. It's a big community. In 1990, the 1990 census gave it a population of 28,259 people. That's just West Memphis, and actually Marion has an additional 5,000 to 6,000 people in 1993. So total, you're talking about over 32,000, 33,000 people in close proximity. That's not what most of us, including me, think of as a small town. In fact, mid-size or larger city comes to mind. In fact, this is larger than Scarsdale, which is a city suburb of New York City. It's all over half the size of Hoboken, which is directly across the Hudson River from New York City and New Jersey, to give some East Coast and New York area analogies. Something else that does not come across in a lot of the coverage, especially the original documentaries, is that West Memphis, at least today, is 65% black. the impression of a community that's largely white, which may be true of the area where the video was shot, where the murders occurred, is created in the video. You do see a few black people shown, but it's overwhelmingly white. Again, the impression is of a small, white, rural town out on a highway very far away. That was not the case. Something else that's not discussed in Paradise Lost for sure is that West Memphis has a high crime rate, and it typically has several murders each year. It's not a situation of a real small town of a few thousand people where the handful of police were overwhelmed by murders they had rarely, if ever, encountered. They, in fact, dealt with this kind of problem over and over again, year after year. Some accounts make something of the fact that they declined assistance from other cities and so forth. However, they had plenty of experience, so it's debatable how strange a decision that was. It also is the case that they should have been fairly experienced with murders, and therefore mistakes that they made are harder to understand as honest mistakes. I'm not saying one way or another, but I'm just saying the actual situation is a medium-sized city, 30-plus thousand people, with a high crime rate, and quite poor, actually, not as perhaps nice as the impression that might be created in some of the scenes. And this is the West Memphis population of their school district, according to them, and again, similar kinds of data to the Wikipedia site. Let me show a little bit of an actual small town that's probably the impression you might have of what West Memphis was, the kind of impression I had from watching it back in the 90s, the original documentary. So this is Forest City, which has a population of about 15,000 people. I still wouldn't call that a small town. But let's zoom in a little bit and go along I-40 about halfway to Little Rock. And this is Brinkley. Here we go. Brinkley, Arkansas. And let me say a little bit about Brinkley. It's right off the highway here again. It has today, according to the Wikipedia page for it, a population. The population was 3,188 people in the 2010 census. This is a downtown shot, and you could easily get the impression, as I did, when you watch the Paradise Lost documentary and you look at these framing shots, that that's what you're looking at, a community much more like Brinkley with a few thousand people, where it's quite conceivable everybody at least knows of everybody else. And this might be a fair description of the neighborhoods in West Memphis right around the truck wash and where the murders occurred. But it doesn't describe the entire city in Marion, which is much, much larger. And it's really not a small town as most of us would conceive of small town. Now, it's true that different people have different definitions of small town, but in the narrative, the story, the plot of Paradise Lost and in many accounts of West Memphis and the West Memphis 3 case and these horrible murders of these 3 8-year-old boys, it's often described in this way, as if it's a small, largely white, rural community out in the hinterlands, far from the big cities, and full of, well, interesting people, as it turns out. But that's inaccurate in describing West Memphis. It's one of a number of misleading impressions and misleading aspects of the original Paradise Lost documentary, which really created the overarching narrative of the case, which continues today, even though the redneck villain, John Mark Byers, in Paradise Lost, the original documentary, has been replaced by another person, Terry Hobbs. And there have been several other major changes in the story, the details of the story, the overarching story of the narrow-minded, small rural town, essentially a Salem witch hunt against these weird kids who listen to too much Metallica and dress in black. That overarching narrative is still the narrative today, and it is highly misleading at best. Our Censored Search website and service enables you to search censored and shadow banned websites for suppressed information. We offer transparency on what the search ranking algorithms are doing and tools to help you separate fact from disinformation. We offer both a free service for everyone and a paid professional service with full access to our tools and the ability to customize the search algorithms for your needs. Our business model is end-user funded to avoid either direct control or subconscious bias from advertisers. Our censored search service is intended as a complement to increasingly censored advertising-funded search engines, such as Google, Yahoo, Bing, and even DuckDuckGo, which appears to be increasingly shadow banning alternative content. We cannot duplicate many useful features of the advertising-funded search engines yet, nor is this needed. Use our search engine for censored and shadow banned content. Get the other side or sides of the story. Remember, there are often more than two sides to a story. Inclusion in our search engine is not an endorsement. We include sites based on evidence of censorship or shadow banning in our judgment. We attempt to be neutral and provide tools to our users to evaluate and verify the content without relying on our fallible judgment. There is evidence that powerful interests actively spread disinformation to alternative sites to make identifying suppressed factual information difficult and discredit factual information through guilt by association. We are developing tools to fight these active disinformation tactics. Give us a try at censored-search.com, censored-search.net, or censored-search.org. We welcome constructive feedback. How can we serve you better? Bookmark our site as the censorship is growing by leaps and bounds. You may need us more in the future. Let your friends and colleagues know. You can access more advanced features and support development of a transparent, verifiable search engine that works for you and not giant advertisers such as Big Pharma by becoming a paid subscriber. If you want to support our development work, subscribe now. This concludes this video presentation. If you like this video, please click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. You can avoid internet censorship by subscribing directly to our RSS news feed. Please consider sharing the link by email and on your website or blog, in addition to liking, upvoting, or sharing on increasingly censored, advertising-beholden, big company social media. We have encountered such censorship. Mathematical software is developing algorithms and software to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and increasing the predictive power of the results. You can support our work financially by subscribing on our Patreon page, https://www.patreon.com/mathsoft, or scanning the QR code in the lower right corner.